You can't think your way out of heartbreak because your brain doesn't treat it as a thought problem. It treats it as physical injury. Neuroimaging studies like those from Columbia University have shown that the same regions of the brain that process physical pain, especially the anterior cingulate cortex and insula, light up when we experience social rejection or a breakup. That aching feeling in your chest, it's not just metaphorical. Your brain is interpreting loss as injury. This is where many people get stuck. We try to reason our way out of the pain, or we distract ourselves endlessly, but the brain doesn't recover through logic or avoidance. It heals through specific, measurable shifts in neurochemistry and behavior. And the good news is we can guide those shifts intentionally. In this episode, we're going to explore how to use neuroscience, not just psychology, to heal after a breakup. You'll learn why heartbreak activates your stress response system, how to reset dopamine and oxytocin pathways, and how to regain cognitive clarity when your mind feels hijacked by rumination. Breakups are not just emotional events. They are neurochemical earthquakes. And if you don't understand what's happening in your brain, it's easy to fall into patterns that delay healing, overanalyzing, checking their social media, avoiding healthy routines, or making impulsive decisions in a state of emotional dysregulation. But if you do understand the science, you gain an edge. You can start rewiring your nervous system for recovery. You can rebuild your capacity for presence, for focus, and eventually for connection. In this video, we'll break down 6 core concepts from neuroscience and behavioral science that will help you navigate this process. Why heartbreak hijacks your brain's reward system, how to use neuroplasticity windows to accelerate recovery, the role of dopamine, oxytocin, and cortisol in emotional regulation, how structured routines and movement reset your brain-body connection, and a protocol for managing rumination and emotional flashbacks, and a science-backed framework for rebuilding trust and self-worth. Each section will include practical tools you can apply immediately, whether you're in day 1 of heartbreak or still healing months later. Let's begin by understanding what's happening in your brain when a relationship ends, and why that awareness is the first step toward true healing. One of the most important and least talked about aspects of heartbreak is this: your brain is in a state of withdrawal, not metaphorically, neurologically. Studies from researchers at Columbia and Rutgers universities, including work by Dr. Lucy Brown and Dr. Helen Fisher, have shown that romantic love activates the brain's reward system, particularly areas like the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and nucleus accumbens. These are the same regions activated by addictive substances like cocaine and opioids. When we fall in love, our brains flood with dopamine, a neuromodulator that creates feelings of pleasure, motivation, and anticipation. Add to that oxytocin and vasopressin, which deepen bonding and trust, and serotonin, which helps regulate mood, and you've got a powerful neurochemical cocktail. Now imagine that cocktail being suddenly removed. That's what a breakup does. It doesn't just remove a person. It pulls the plug on the chemical system your brain has come to rely on for emotional regulation and reward. That's why breakups can lead to obsessive thoughts, loss of appetite, disrupted sleep, and a feeling of emptiness, all classic withdrawal symptoms. This isn't about weakness, it's about neurobiology. Here's what the research shows. The post-breakup brain often stays stuck in a loop. It keeps scanning for the person, the patterns, and the rituals that once created predictable dopamine spikes, checking their social media, replaying old memories, or fantasizing about getting back together. These are all the brain's way of trying to reactivate the reward circuit. But here's the problem. Every time you engage in those behaviors, you reinforce the neural pathway that says, this is the source of my reward. You're wiring in craving, not closure. So how do you interrupt that loop? A simple tool to apply is called dopamine replacement through effort-based rewards. Here's how it works. Instead of chasing passive, familiar sources of pleasure, like scrolling or stalking, you intentionally engage in behaviors that generate dopamine through effort. Think 30 minutes of focused exercise, tackling a meaningful project, or learning a new skill. Why effort? Because the VTA responds not just to reward, but to the anticipation of reward earned. That's why things like cold exposure, resistance training, or even intense bouts of focus can feel satisfying afterward. They trigger endogenous dopamine release in a way that helps reset the reward system. Another powerful strategy is deliberate novelty. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself, thrives on novelty. This can be as small as taking a different walking route, trying a new coffee shop, or listening to a new genre of music. Novelty tells the brain, we're not stuck, we're adapting. And that opens the door to forming new neural associations that are not tied to your past relationship. Let me ask you this. Have you noticed how the same memory can feel sharper or more painful when you're tired or sedentary? That's not just in your head. When your dopamine system is underactive, negative emotional circuits have more room to dominate. That's why movement, novelty, and goal-directed behavior are crucial in the early stages of healing. Here's one more protocol you can try, supported by behavioral neuroscience, the 3x10 rule. 3 dopamine-positive actions per day, each lasting at least 10 minutes. Examples could include a brisk walk outdoors, journaling a goal or insight, practicing breath work or meditation, engaging in creative work or a flow-inducing task. These activities don't need to feel amazing in the moment. What matters is that they are voluntary, effortful, and engaging. That's the recipe for restoring healthy dopamine signaling. You can't control the pain of heartbreak, but you can influence how your brain responds to it. And by resetting the reward system, you create the neurochemical foundation for deeper healing. One of the most surprising and hopeful insights from neuroscience is this: your brain is never more capable of change than when you're in emotional pain. That might sound counterintuitive. Pain feels like shutdown. But biologically, emotional disruption opens what researchers call a plasticity window, a period when your brain is more sensitive to learning and rewiring. This is part of an adaptive survival response. When you go through a breakup, your brain is faced with uncertainty, loss of prediction, and a destabilized identity. As a result, the amygdala, which processes threat and emotional salience, goes into overdrive. At the same time, the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, decision-making, become highly active, trying to make sense of what just happened. This increased activity heightens neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections. Here's the key insight. What you do during this window matters immensely. Your habits, your thoughts, your routines, all of these are now shaping the neural pathways that determine how you move forward. You can either wire in resilience or reinforce pain. Let's break that down with an analogy. Think of your brain like a ski slope. Over time, snow gets carved into deep grooves. Those are your habitual patterns of thought and behavior. A breakup is like a fresh snowstorm. The grooves haven't disappeared, but there's now an opportunity to create new tracks if you take intentional paths. Here's a tool to guide that intention: pattern priming. This involves creating a short, structured ritual each morning during the first 30-60 minutes after waking, when the brain is most neurochemically receptive. A simple version: sunlight exposure, 5 to 10 minutes, movement, walk, stretch, light workout, 10 minutes. Mind anchoring, journaling a core intention, or repeating a specific mantra, 5 minutes. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistency. You're telling your brain, this is the new groove. And over time, these actions become encoded as stable neural circuits that reduce emotional volatility and increase forward momentum. Another science-backed protocol is state-dependent encoding reversal. Here's what that means. Your brain stores emotional memories in context, linked to specific states of mind, environments, music, even scents. That's why a certain song or place can suddenly bring back emotional pain. To rewrite that response, you need to re-enter those contexts in a new emotional state. For example, return to a place that triggers memory, but do it with a friend in daylight after a workout. Listen to the song, but pair it with deep breathing, positive visualization, or movement. Over time, this decouples the memory from the pain. This is not denial, it's neuroplasticity in action. You might be wondering, How long does this plasticity window last? Research from Stanford and UCLA suggests that the brain's heightened sensitivity to emotional learning persists for approximately 4 to 6 weeks post-disruption, sometimes longer depending on stress and sleep quality. This is why establishing healthy rituals in the first month after a breakup has such a profound long-term impact. But the most empowering part? You don't need to feel ready to start. You just need to start. Action comes before clarity. Motion creates emotion. If this insight is helping you, if you're starting to see your pain as a potential platform for growth, consider subscribing. We break down the science of emotional recovery, habit formation, and mental performance every single week. And you never know when one small shift in understanding can change the entire trajectory of your healing. You're not broken, you're rewiring. And right now, your brain is listening more closely than you think. If you've ever felt like you're emotionally crashing after a breakup, swings in mood, crying without warning, or waking up with a sense of dread, you're not imagining it. These aren't just emotional reactions. They're the biochemical fallout of hormonal imbalance, especially involving oxytocin and cortisol. Let's start with oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is released during physical affection, eye contact, and emotional closeness. But its role goes far beyond romantic connection. It calms the nervous system, reduces anxiety, and strengthens feelings of trust and safety. In a healthy relationship, your brain becomes accustomed to regular oxytocin release through touch, voice, and shared rituals. When that relationship ends, oxytocin levels drop sharply. But the brain, still wired for connection, keeps looking for the familiar source. This leads to what researchers call oxytocin withdrawal, a state characterized by anxiety, emotional dysregulation, and even physical discomfort. Compounding this is the spike in cortisol, the brain and body's primary stress hormone. When emotional bonds are severed, the brain perceives it as a survival threat, particularly because relationships historically ensured protection and resource sharing in our evolutionary past. Cortisol rises, increasing heart rate, impairing digestion, and disrupting sleep. This oxytocin-cortisol imbalance can trap you in a cycle. You feel unsafe and unsettled. Your body seeks soothing, but the primary source, the relationship, is gone, leading to more stress and longing. But how do you break that cycle? One effective method is what's known as social rhythm therapy, originally developed for mood disorders, but incredibly useful for breakup recovery. The concept is simple. You restore emotional balance by replacing lost oxytocin rhythms with new, predictable forms of social and sensory contact. Here's what the research supports. Consistent time with emotionally safe people, even brief, like a 10-minute call. Physical touch through safe alternatives, such as massage, self-myofascial release, foam rolling, or even placing your hand over your heart during breath work. Scheduled routines, not to control time, but to signal safety to your nervous system. A simple starting protocol, wake time and bedtime within 30 minutes daily. One microsocial connection each day, voice or in person. One act of physical self-soothing, EGN, sauna, stretch, massage ball. What's happening in your brain when you do this is powerful. These rituals begin restabilizing the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis, which governs your stress response. As cortisol levels normalize, your cognitive clarity improves, and as oxytocin is gradually replaced through safe, consistent signals, your sense of emotional safety starts to return. Another often overlooked tool, environmental cues. The brain ties certain places, smells, and lighting patterns to the presence of a partner. Revisiting these unconsciously reactivates longing or distress. So one strategy is environmental repairing, modifying your physical space to create new sensory associations. That might look like moving furniture slightly, changing your lighting setup, introducing new scents like lavender or citrus, which reduce cortisol. These small changes send a message to your nervous system. This is a new phase. We are safe here, now. Be prepared for waves. Biochemical recovery is not linear. Oxytocin and cortisol fluctuate based on sleep, nutrition, stress exposure, and even memory activation. But every small act of regulation is a signal to your brain we're moving forward. Ask yourself, what's one action I can take today to give my brain a new cue of safety. And if this kind of science-backed, practical content resonates with you, go ahead and subscribe. Each video is designed to give you tools, not just theories, to master your mental and emotional state, because healing is not about forgetting. It's about rebalancing one system, one signal, one small step at a time. If you've ever felt like your emotions were more intense at night, or that everything feels slightly easier after a good workout in the morning, that's not just coincidence, that's neuroscience in motion. Two of the most powerful tools for emotional recovery after a breakup are movement and circadian rhythm alignment. These aren't just lifestyle tips, they're levers that influence the core neurochemistry of mood, cognition, and motivation. Let's start with movement. Exercise, especially moderate aerobic activity, has been shown to boost levels of dopamine, serotonin, and brain-dissected neurotrophic factor, BDNF. BDNF is often referred to as fertilizer for the brain because it supports the growth of new neurons and neural connections, particularly in areas involved in memory and emotion regulation, like the hippocampus. But here's where it gets especially relevant. Studies from Harvard and Duke University show that 20-30 minutes of aerobic exercise, even just 3 times per week, can be as effective as antidepressants in alleviating symptoms of mild to moderate depression. And the emotional lows after a breakup can mirror the same neurochemical patterns. So if you're not moving, you're not just staying still, you're reinforcing the stagnation in your neurochemistry. A simple science-backed protocol, 20 minutes of morning movement, ideally outdoors. This could be a walk, light jog, bodyweight exercises, or even dynamic stretching. The goal isn't intensity, it's consistency, and pairing it with sunlight for maximum circadian and mood benefit. That brings us to circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm is your internal 24-hour clock. It regulates when hormones like cortisol and melatonin rise and fall, which directly affects energy, mood, and sleep. After a breakup, this rhythm often gets thrown off, especially if you're staying up late, thinking, sleeping irregularly, or withdrawing from your usual routines. Here's what the research shows. Getting early day light exposure, ideally within 30-60 minutes of waking, helps anchor your circadian rhythm, improves sleep quality, and reduces cortisol spikes later in the day. Even just 10 minutes of sunlight exposure, no sunglasses, outside, sends a powerful signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain to reset your body clock. And that's crucial because poor sleep leads to impaired emotion regulation. In fact, studies from UC Berkeley's Matthew Walker Lab have shown that sleep-deprived individuals have up to 60% more amygdala reactivity, meaning their emotional centers go into hyperdrive when rest is lacking. So the protocol is simple but powerful. Wake up and go outside within an hour, no phone scrolling. Move your body. Even 5-10 minutes is enough to shift neurochemistry. Maintain a consistent sleep-wake time, especially in the first 2 hours of your day. Here's a real-world analogy. Think of your brain as a high-performance vehicle. Breakups can knock it off alignment. Morning movement and light exposure are like recalibrating your internal GPS, giving your body and brain a reliable rhythm to trust, even when your emotions feel unpredictable. It's also worth mentioning that movement provides what psychologists call behavioral activation, a term used in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, to describe the way physical activity can preemptively shift mood and cognition. So next time you feel the heaviness setting in, ask yourself, have I moved my body today? Have I seen the sun? Because your brain isn't just looking for closure, it's looking for signals of stability, signals of possibility. And this right here is a signal you're serious about growing. If this kind of actionable, science-backed content speaks to where you are right now, go ahead and subscribe. You'll get tools and protocols every week to keep upgrading your inner world. Because movement isn't just about the body, it's the mind's way forward. You've likely experienced it, the mental loop that plays over and over after a breakup. What did I miss? Could I have done something differently? Why does it still hurt so much? This is rumination. And while it's natural, it can become toxic. Rumination is the process of repetitive, passive focus on distress and its possible causes and consequences. It feels like problem solving, but it's actually cognitive paralysis disguised as reflection. Neuroscience shows us why it happens. Breakups disrupt the default mode network, DMN, a network of brain regions that includes the medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex. This system becomes hyperactive during rest and is strongly associated with self-referential thinking. When you're not engaged in a task, the DMN turns inward, analyzing, comparing, rehashing. After a breakup, it becomes a breeding ground for emotional overload. And here's what the research shows. Persistent DMN activation, especially during emotional distress, is linked to increased risk of depression, sleep disruption, and even impaired working memory. It's like your brain is stuck in emotional buffering mode, playing scenes you don't want to rewatch. So how do we interrupt that loop? The key lies in a concept called cognitive friction, strategically engaging the brain in tasks that demand present moment focus and redirect neural activity away from the DMN and toward the task positive network, TPN, which supports attention, problem solving, and executive function. Here's how to apply it. 1. The 5-minute rule of cognitive redirection. Set a timer for just 5 minutes. Do something that forces attention, a timed puzzle, a nonverbal memory game, a rapid journaling prompt like list 10 things you're grateful for, no repeats. This short burst of effort breaks the passive loop of rumination and activates your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which enhances cognitive control and emotion regulation. 2. Novelty-driven tasks. Introducing novelty is another effective way to shift brain networks. Research from the University of Hamburg shows that novel stimuli increase dopamine release in the hippocampus and promote pattern separation, a process critical for distinguishing present experiences from past memories. Translation, try something new. It doesn't need to be dramatic. A new route to work, a new podcast, cooking a dish you've never made. These small changes create cognitive breaks that dilute the emotional intensity of recurring thoughts. 3. Verbal disruption techniques. Sometimes all you need is to say something out loud. When you feel rumination building, try this phrase. This is a loop. I've felt it before. I'm choosing not to feed it. This isn't magical thinking. It's called metacognition, the awareness of your own thought processes. It shifts brain activity from the emotional centers to the prefrontal cortex, increasing your ability to self-regulate. Here's an analogy. Imagine your thoughts are like a playlist on repeat. Every time you ruminate, you're hitting replay on the same track. Cognitive friction is reaching over and clicking next, not because you've forgotten the last song, but because you're choosing to change the station. It won't always be easy. The mind loves patterns, even painful ones, but every time you interrupt the loop, even briefly, you weaken the neural pathway, and that's neuroplasticity at work. Ask yourself, what's one mental pattern I can break today, even just for 5 minutes? If this type of insight is helping you shift how you think and feel, drop a comment below. Let us know which technique resonates most. And it also helps signal the algorithm to share this with others who might need it. You're not just healing for yourself, you're contributing to a ripple effect of growth. Rumination is a loop, but with intention and tools, it doesn't have to become your reality. One of the most unsettling aspects of a breakup is the identity collapse that often follows. You're not just losing a person, you're losing routines, roles, future plans. The brain doesn't just grieve the relationship, it grieves the self that existed within it. This identity disruption can feel like emotional freefall, but neuroscience offers a path forward, not through forgetting the past, but by rewiring identity around new goal-directed behaviors that engage specific neurochemical systems. Let's start with what's actually happening in your brain. Relationships, especially close ones, become embedded in your salience network, which helps the brain decide what's important and worthy of attention. Shared experiences, phrases, daily habits, all of these are tagged as emotionally significant. When the relationship ends, the brain doesn't simply delete those tags. Instead, there's a void in what we call goal reward circuitry, particularly involving the mesolimbic dopamine system. This system includes the ventral tegmental area, VTA, and the nucleus accumbens, brain regions that fuel motivation, drive, and a sense of reward. After a breakup, the expected sources of dopamine release shared laughter, plans, intimacy disappear, creating what researchers call a hypodopaminergic state, essentially a drop in drive and purpose. The antidote? Rebuilding identity around novel, intrinsically motivated goals that re-engage the brain's reward circuitry. Here's what the research suggests works best. 1. Autonomy-based goals. These are goals that are self-chosen and personally meaningful, not reactive or designed to prove something. Studies from the self-determination theory framework show that autonomy is a critical component for sustained dopamine release and resilience. Ask yourself, what's something I want purely because it matters to me, not to impress or distract? Start small. It could be learning a new language, committing to a fitness routine, or launching a personal project. The structure matters less than the ownership. 2. Measurable progress, even in micro doses. Dopamine isn't just released when we reach goals. It spikes as we make progress toward them. The key is clarity. Set concrete, visible steps and track them. If you're working out, log each session. If you're reading, track chapters finished. If you're building something, keep a visible journal or board of progress. This visible feedback loop tells the brain, I'm moving forward direction. 3. Temporal landmarks and self-renewal. Research from Wharton's Catherine Milkman introduced the concept of the fresh start effect. The idea that people are more motivated to pursue goals following a psychological reset point, like a birthday, new month, or even a Monday. These landmarks help us break from our past identity and signal a new chapter. Use this intentionally. Mark a reset point on your calendar. Call it day 1. This isn't about forgetting the past. It's about creating a neural boundary between who you were in that relationship and who you are becoming now. A simple protocol to begin re-identity building. Choose one goal that aligns with your core values, break it into weekly micro steps, create visual feedback, journal, app, calendar, pair it with a new habit, e.g. a playlist you only use during this task, to create fresh neural associations. Think of it this way, your brain doesn't just respond to what you focus on, it adapts to why you focus on it. When your actions are fueled by aligned intrinsic motivation, you're not just healing, you're resculpting identity at the neural level. Ask yourself, what does the future version of me do every day? And how can I start building that version now? This is the beginning of earned confidence, not from numbing or distraction, but from momentum. Because healing after a breakup isn't about getting back to who you were, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be when the noise is gone and the clarity arrives. Healing after a breakup isn't just emotional, it's neurological. Every time your heart aches, your thoughts loop, or your energy dips, it's not weakness. It's your brain adjusting to the loss of a person who had become embedded in your neural architecture. But that's also where the hope lives, because the same science that explains why heartbreak hurts also explains how we heal. Let's briefly recap the 6 core tools we explored, recognizing emotional withdrawal as a real neurochemical process. We reframed heartbreak not as weakness, but as a biologically driven withdrawal from an attachment system, complete with dopamine crashes and stress hormone spikes. Knowing this shifts your inner narrative from blame to biology, from guilt to understanding, attachment system rewiring, and the role of emotional regulation. We looked at how practicing emotional regulation and self-directed soothing, like journaling, breathwork, and co-regulation with trusted others, can help the brain slowly decommission the old map and begin constructing a new one. The importance of social support and the oxytocin-cortisol axis. You learn that connection, even in small doses, counteracts the stress physiology of isolation. Hugging someone you trust, sharing a meal, or simply hearing a supportive voice recalibrates the oxytocin-cortisol balance and grounds your nervous system. Circadian alignment and movement as emotional regulators. We saw how morning light, physical activity, and sleep consistency support brain regions like the hippocampus and amygdala, enhancing mood stability, memory formation, and resilience during emotional stress. Interrupting the rumination loop through cognitive friction. By engaging in present-centered, novelty-driven, or effort-based tasks, you create cognitive breaks from default mode network overactivity, building mental flexibility and reducing emotional inertia. Rebuilding identity through goal-directed neurochemistry. You learned how intrinsically motivated goals reawaken the brain's reward system and build a new sense of self, one grounded not in the past relationship, but in your chosen future. Here's the deeper truth. Every tool we discussed isn't just about feeling better, it's about becoming better. Because what you're doing beneath the surface is rewiring your brain, literally. This is neuroplasticity. Your brain's ability to change its structure, function, and chemistry in response to experience and intention. And when that change is directed by clarity, supported by science, and reinforced by daily action, the result isn't just healing, it's transformation. You don't have to get over them to move forward. You just have to get closer to you, the version of you who sleeps better, thinks clearer, connects more deeply, and acts with grounded purpose. That version already exists in potential. Your job is to signal to your brain over and over again what matters now, what's safe now, what's possible now. So here's a challenge. Choose one tool from today, whether it's a 5-minute walk in the morning, a new micro-gallo, a journaling prompt, or a loop interruption technique. Commit to practicing it every day for 7 days. Track what changes in mood, focus, energy, or clarity. Then let us know in the comments how it went. Share your insights, your wins, your questions, because when you engage, you not only reinforce your learning, you help others see what's possible too. And if this speech helped you reframe your healing as something intelligent, hopeful, and within reach, like, subscribe, and join this community. Every week we break down science like this to help you rebuild stronger, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Because the pain won't last forever. But the tools you build now, those will serve you for life.